Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 134 based on novel. So let's start. The blood rain wasn't heavy, and the area covered wasn't vast. It landed just on the foothills where the group resided. Qin Mu saw numerous trees and flowers growing at an astounding speed. The trunks were tall and verdant, while the spiritual air in the surroundings was so dense it seemed to be on the verge of materializing, floating around the trees like ribbons. Among the flowers, there was a milky white fog which made them look abnormally bright and tender. After the long rain, the lake, moat, and river were all filled up, and numerous fishes grew frantically, transforming into fish monsters like those in Great Ruins. Some of them grew legs and jumped onto the shore. When they opened their mouths to catch the raindrops, razor-sharp teeth could be seen. The bodies of the auspicious beasts in the mountains also expanded, and all kinds of bone spikes pushed out, making them look terrifying. The mermaids in the lake had also become abnormally huge, and their once beautiful faces had become strange. The energy in the gods' blood was too great, transforming all the life forms into misshapen monsters. That kind of growth couldn't be controlled, and the places which had been touched by the blood rain first would usually grow more than other places. The land and insects were also living things, so when they got drenched by the blood rain, the foothill transformed into a place reminiscent of Great Ruins. In Qin Mu's eyes, it was the powerful Qi of Yin and Yang, 4 symbols, and 5 phases, which had changed the balance in the bodies of the various life forms, resulting in the abnormal transformations. But it was different from his home. Most of the strange beasts in Great Ruins had the bloodlines of gods and devils, which were hereditary. The strange beasts in the foothills, however, had been transformed by the powerful energy in the god's blood. Which god fell? Is it that dragon-rearing sovereign? Mu Qingdai asked in a low voice. Outside the huge hall, the entire mountain was covered with multicolored lights and white fog, decorating the place as if it was a sacred ground. However, if they walked into the blood rain, they would probably transform like the life forms in the mountain. If they weren't drenched directly, they could cultivate under the roof and absorb the powerful divine energy outside. That, to a divine arts practitioner, was definitely a sacred ground for cultivation. Based solely on the spiritual and divine energies, the 3 big sacred ground of Eternal Peace Empire were much inferior. After all, no matter if it was Heavenly Devil Cult, Tao Sect, or Great Thunderclap Monastery, none of them would be able to kill a god to nourish their sacred ground. Granny had decided to stay in this desolate land to keep Li Tianqing here, but she would never have expected this place to become a sacred ground for cultivation, right? Qin Mu had a weird expression. He used Carefree Sword to carefully catch a drop of God's blood and examined it. He then shook his head. This isn't dragon-rearing sovereign's blood. His blood is dragon's blood, but the divine energy here isn't such. His expression became even weirder after he said that. I've seen this blood before. Qin Mu lowered the blade, and the droplet of blood flowed to the tip of the sword. With his wrist lifting and lowering the blade, the drop flowed continuously on the sword, never sliding off. Suddenly, energy burst forth from the sword, and the power in the drop of God's blood was also activated. It was like a divine art exploding, and the surging energy clashed with the power of Qin Mu's move, forcing him to move backward repeatedly. Qin Mu nodded and said solemnly, I have seen this god's blood before. A year ago, when the snow disaster suddenly stopped, it was Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, who had found the god who was responsible for it. He fought a fierce battle with him and was severely injured at the end. However, that god was also injured and bled. When I treated Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's injuries, I saw the blood of that god, and the energy in that blood was very similar to this. Back then, Qin Mu had used a sword pellet that Mute had given him to act as a bridge to connect the remnant of the god's divine arts with the god's blood, activating their energies to wipe out each other and lessen the injuries. Only then was he able to treat Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. However, the obliteration of that energy had eaten up a lot of his sword pellet. It had been given to him by Mute to deal with village chief and comprehend a higher level of forging techniques. Qin Mu had regretted what happened to it for a period of time. Qin Mu remembered those days very well. It was because Emperor Yang Feng had been encircled by old Dao Master, an old Rulai at the time, almost dying, and it had been Qin Mu who had saved him. Back then, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and Emperor Yang Feng had both become useless and were in a terrible state. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had even brought his wife to live in seclusion in a random valley while his wife was pregnant. The god killed by Sunshot Divine Cannon is the god who sent the snow disaster. Qin Mu's gaze flickered between light and dark as he said softly, "This is his retribution, he deserved to die." During the snow disaster, those that suffered were the poor, and the population of Eternal Peace Empire had instantly decreased by 20–30%. The number of people who had died was even larger than in most wars. The three from Little Jade Capital didn't say anything. When the snow disaster had erupted, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had gone to Little Jade Capital. Hermit Qin Mu had tried to stop him, wanting him to stay at Little Jade Capital to end the reform. The immortals of Little Jade Capital thought that it was the reform of Imperial Preceptor and Emperor Yang Feng that was the root of the snow disaster, so it had to be stopped for the disaster to end. Wang Muren and the rest had also heard about that matter. After being in a bad mood for a few days, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had still left Little Jade Capital, and not long later, the snow disaster stopped. However, Hermit Qin Mu frowned at that and told them that Eternal Peace Empire was still determined to proceed with its reform. At that time, no matter if it was Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor or the Immortals of Little Jade Capital, none of them would have expected the events to proceed to such a stage. No one would have expected a god to fall, and it was a god that had sent the disaster. It was hard to say what change his death would bring to Eternal Peace Empire. No one could guess nor predict it. Qin Mu used clear water to wash the Emperor's disc numerous times, but he still didn't dare to touch it. He mixed a few herbs and let it soak in the concoction, before finally picking it up. He then hung it back around his neck. Outside, the blood rain gradually stopped, and the dark clouds in the sky dispersed. The day became bright once again. Qin Mu and the rest walked out of the huge hall, and rose into the air to avoid the blood water on the ground. The sky was clear, with no clouds for 10,000 miles. The battle above Eternal Empire was like a dream that had never happened. Sunshine came from the west, and the blue sky looked clear as though it had been washed clean. The air seemed to have become much fresher as well. The group stood in the air and examined their surroundings. Suddenly, Qin Mu looked to the north and saw a humongous object flying over. It was Sunshot Divine Cannon, and it was actually hurrying over to them through the sky. Emperor Yang Feng and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor stood on the floating battery, their clothes fluttering in the breeze. There were numerous officials by their side as well. Qin Mu had taught Emperor Yang Feng how to control Sunshot Divine Cannon, so he was probably the one who had fired it earlier. On the battery, the flames of the pill furnaces gave off white-colored rays, while the divine eye in the center was slowly revolving around and giving off terrifying might. Emperor Yanfeng's face was shining with happiness, and he was full of enthusiasm. "The divine cannon that you forged has shot down a god," Long Yu said. "The era has changed, even a mortal can kill a god that's high above." "Human Emperor, is this a good thing or a bad thing?" "I don't know. I only know that the gods can no longer behave unscrupulously." Qin Mu's mind trembled. The Sunshot Divine Cannon he had forged had shot down a god that was high above. It was a kind of supreme honor. Long Yu looked at him and suddenly sighed meaningfully. Human Emperor, there are many collections in my little jade capital. If you have the time, I would suggest you read about the history of the previous eras. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He flew over to the battery and smiled. I still have to return to the capital and research with Sister Yushio on how to cultivate primordial spirit on 6 Directions realm, to push ahead with the reform. When there's time, I will go to Little Jade Capital. The old immortals there even promised me to let me have a chance to enter Hall of 5 Qi. Long Yu sighed and didn't say any more. Wang Muren was drunk with cultivation, while Mu Qingdai couldn't sit still. Among the 3 disciples of Little Jade Capital, Long Yu was the only one calm enough to browse through the numerous books their sacred ground possess. Sunshot Divine Cannon killing a god was admittedly shocking, but the consequences it might bring worried him. Wang Muren and Mu Qingdai also went toward the battery, so Long Yu could only follow along. Your Majesty. Imperial Preceptor. Qin Mu and the rest landed on the battery and greeted the people there. Eternal Yangfeng could hardly conceal his excitement as he waved his hand. He said with a smile, "There's no need for formalities, Minister Qin. This cannon." Qin Mu smiled and said, "Does your Majesty feel invigorated?" Emperor Yangfeng was full of enthusiasm as he laughed out loud. "Great. This cannon I used just killed a god that had sent the disaster. This is far more than invigorating. This is enforcing justice on behalf of heaven. It's a pity that the other gods had run away too fast, otherwise, we could have let Imperial Preceptor feel great, and even Minister Qin to have a taste of it." A scribe behind him coughed and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, mind your words." Emperor Yangfeng waved his hand and smiled. "Just don't record it and it will be fine. I have long itching to fire at least one bloody shot. But what could I do when it exhausts that much medicinal stones? If I hadn't heard that Minister Qin was in danger, having been kidnapped by a weird-looking god and there were gods fighting around here, I wouldn't have had the chance to use this huge cannon." "That's right, Minister Qin, come and meet this victim, the sect leader of Great White Sword Sect. He came to make an imperial appeal, saying you brought a weird-looking existence and a bunch of flood dragons to seize his Great White Sword Sect." Qin Mu looked behind Emperor Yangfeng and saw a white-haired elder step out with a smile. "This sect leader said that you and that weird man seized the treasure of his Great White Sword Sect." Emperor Yangfeng smiled and said, "I felt that something was wrong here, so I invited Imperial Preceptor. He said that your Heavenly Saint cult didn't have so many flood dragons, so you were most likely in danger." Qin Mu thanked Imperial Preceptor. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor shook his head. "There's no need to thank me, just thank Great White Sect Leader. If he didn't come forth to submit an imperial appeal, nobody would have known you were in danger." Great White Sect Leader immediately said, "One who does not know is not guilty. I thought Cult Master Qin wanted to seize our Great White Sword Sect and swallow our treasure, so I had gone forth to the capital in a hurry. Never would I have expected to be doing a meritorious deed by this. Cult Master Qin, are there any treasures in our Great White Mountain? If Cult Master really got a treasure, could it be returned to our Great White Sword Sect?" This? Qin Mu revealed a troubled expression, truly at a loss. He didn't know if he should tell the truth to the Great White Sect leader. Suddenly, a soldier flew over and reported, "Your Majesty, the god's corpse has been found." Emperor Yanfeng's spirit was greatly roused. He waved his hand and smiled. "Bring it up." No long later, the god's body was lifted up by several experts and its might filled the air. Yet it was merely a broken thing, split into so many pieces that they could never be put together again. The head of the god was still complete, though, and his face could still be seen. "It's the god I met. He said he came from high heavens," Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said after taking a look at him. "His abilities were extremely high. When I fought with him, I had to go all in to force him back, yet I was still crippled by him. The conclusion on that battle was Imperial Preceptor being so damaged that he dejectedly decided to live in seclusion beside the Blood Lake with his wife. If it wasn't for Qin Mu who had found him, he might have disappeared from the world from then on. Qin Mu examined the head and was slightly stunned. There was something familiar about it. It seemed to be made from fine jade, and even though the god was dead, there were still no flaws to be found. The man looked very young, unlike some elder one might expect. However, gods lived as long as the heaven and earth, so it was difficult to guess their true age from their appearance alone. The head of this god looks a little like. Qin Mu's expression was weird. The god and Xu Xinghua looked slightly similar. But the similarity wasn't only in their appearance. Xu Xinghua was a perfect person who seemed like he was sculpted from flawless fine jade. He looked very exquisite. And the head was the same. It mirrored that of a human, but it was more like a jade carving than anything real. This god that was killed, could it be Jade Sovereign, the master Xu Xinghua had once mentioned? Qin Mu stared with his eyes wide open. Xu Xinghua's master, Jade Sovereign, could have very well been killed by Emperor Yang Feng with the cannon. Jade Sovereign was the person who sent disaster on Eternal Peace Empire, so he deserved death. I wonder what Xu Xinghua's reaction will be when he finds out. Qin Mu pondered about it, but he didn't say anything. He didn't plan on revealing that relationship. If Emperor Yang Feng knew that Jade Sovereign was Xu Xinghua's master, he would definitely get rid of Xu Xinghua to prevent danger in the future. The emperor never went by the rules of the martial world. So because Qin Mu admired Xu Xinghua very much, he didn't say a word, not wishing for him to die just like that. Minister Qin forged this sunshot divine cannon, so his contributions are endless. I haven't rewarded him yet, so I shall reward him with the head of this god, Emperor Yang Feng said. Don't want. Emperor Yanfeng's expression changed slightly, and he grunted as he felt his face was lost. Qin Mu then immediately smiled and said, I did not achieve anything in this battle of slaughtering the god, so how would I dare to take the trophy? Your Majesty had fired the cannon, and the number of medicinal stones exhausted must be great. So this trophy should be put into the imperial treasury. Such words were easy on the ears and gave the emperor face in front of his officials. Emperor Yang Feng was pleased. He smiled and said, Minister sees the overall picture, and I shall not force you. This credit of forging sunshot divine cannon, I shall help you donate it to the imperial treasury. Qin Mu's face instantly turned black. Emperor Yang Feng laughed loudly. But he soon remembered how much medicinal stones were exhausted by the sunshot divine cannon, and felt a pain in his heart. It felt great firing the cannon, but the money required for it was a terrifying thing. The battle between gods and devils had made Emperor Yang Feng lead the experts of the imperial court, with the battery from the capital to the hills. He had to maintain sunshot divine cannon to fly in the sky, so the amount of medicinal stones used was definitely higher than when just firing the cannon once. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and Ling Yushu might have brought numerous treasures back from barbarian Di Empire and Wolfstore country, but sunshot divine cannon was like an abyss that couldn't be filled, the gold-swallowing beast. If he played with it for any longer than necessary, the empire would go bankrupt. This is the first god my Eternal Peace Empire slaughtered. Emperor Yang Feng raised his head to look at the sky and sneered. There may be a second and even third one from today onwards. My people are not fish and meat, and I'm not a coward that those gods can just mess around with. Return back to the court. Sunshot divine cannon gradually changed direction, and Qin Mu hesitated for a moment. He said, Your Majesty, I still have some minor stuff I have to attend to, so I have to stay here for some time. Emperor Yang Feng looked at him and said, Minister Qin, could you know those strong practitioners that were fighting against the gods? You want to stay to meet them? Qin Mu nodded and said, "They are my elders." Emperor Yangfeng seemed to have a smile that yet not a smile. "There are quite a number of elders in your family. Can you introduce them to me? The empire is currently in need of talented people, and I would like to meet these experts with peerless talents." Qin Mu immediately pointed at Wang Muren and said, "There should be a few that were his elders. My elders don't really like to meet outsiders, so your majesty should ask their elders." Wang Muren shook his head and said, "Your majesty, my elders also don't like to meet outsiders." Emperor Yanfeng's face turned black. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor coughed, and took a step to stand beside him. His body slanted nonchalantly, and he whispered in Emperor Yanfeng's ear, "Their elders are all remarkable people. On one side, there's old human emperor, who is living in seclusion in great ruins and mysterious experts like Heaven Knife. On the other side, it's little jade capital. Your majesty can't pull in any one of them." Emperor Yangfeng jumped in shock, astonished. He also knew about little jade capital. Even though they were hidden in seclusion, its position was above the three big sacred grounds, and some mysterious old immortals stayed there. Yet Imperial Preceptor placed Qin Mu's family even above little jade capital. Could it be a sacred ground that was hidden in great ruins? Imperial Preceptor, since there's the old human emperor, the human emperor of this generation. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor shook his head and said, "The pavilion closest to the water enjoys moonlight first. The human emperor of this generation won't be your majesty." Emperor Yanfeng's heart trembled and he looked at Qin Mu, slightly dizzy. Qin Mu asked to be excused again, and Emperor Yangfeng hesitated for a moment. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor knew the thoughts of this ruler, aware that he had put his guard up against the new human emperor. "Your Majesty." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor coughed. Emperor Yangfeng came back to his senses and waved his hand. "Minister Qin, handling your matters is more important, you may withdraw first." Qin Mu jumped down from the battery. Wang Muren and the rest also went after him. Emperor Yangfeng looked at their figures moving away, while Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor stood silently behind him. He suddenly said, "Your Majesty had the intent to kill." There was that moment. Emperor Yangfeng didn't hide anything from him and admitted without a moment's hesitation. "Him being the Heavenly Devil Cult Master already made me put my guard up. Even though Heavenly Devil Cult has a devil in their name, they are the number one cult. They may be a sect in name, but they are actually a country in our country. I always felt uneasy by putting him in an important position. Now that he has also become the current human emperor, it makes me even more worried." He sighed and said, "Heavenly Devil Cult Master is so outstanding and such a person is hard to control. My sons and daughters won't be able to be a match for him. My life will come to an end in time and then, Eternal Peace Empire will be in his pockets. So my intent to kill had indeed awoken." He stood there and looked at Qin Mu and the rest leaving into the distance. "But it's gone now," he said with a calm expression. Emperor Yangfeng raised his head to look at the sky, and his tone became calmer and calmer. "Imperial Preceptor, even though you and I are minister and ruler, we are actually brothers and our hearts are connected. We are both outstanding and rare in this world. With you and I working together to reform the country, it is still so difficult. We seem to be piloting a small boat that could be flipped over anytime by the strong gales and big waves. I was thinking, what if we failed? What if we died? Who shall succeed our mission in life?" He turned around with a fervent expression. He raised his hands and grabbed the shoulders of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, his eyes incomparably bright. "I have to think about my Ling family, about Eternal Peace Empire, our cause, the reform. So I can't have any intent to kill him. Our cause needs to have a successor, someone to follow in our footsteps after we fail. My sons and daughters don't have the ability, but he has. Isn't that right, my Dao friend? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor heard the phrase Dao friend and his heart moved. He nodded gently. He has the ability. Everyone knew he was the advocate for the reform, his thoughts and efforts concentrated solely on it. He wanted to be a saint that established his virtue, his merit, and his ideas in writing. However, no one knew that he had also faced a moment of weakness, of being at a loss, that he had also thought about giving up. The person that gave him the biggest support and made him persevere was his close friend. Emperor Yangfeng was his best friend, his most reliable comrade in arms. This kind of friendship was something others wouldn't understand. Dao friend. To have met such a Dao friend in this lifetime was enough for him. I will stand by your side. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked into the distance, his heart calm. Always. Qin Mu and the rest returned to the palace, that was nearly soaked with spiritual qi and energy. When they landed on the ground, they saw that there were quite a few people waiting in the palace for them. Mua, return to Great Ruins with us. Blind stood up by propping himself on his cane. He walked toward Qin Mu and pulled onto his hand. He said resolutely, Butcher, village chief, there's no need for further discussion, let's go back to Great Ruins, immediately. Butcher quickly rose and sheathed his knives behind his back. He said coldly, Blind, are you scared? Blind sneered at him. I'm scared. Half of my body is almost in the grave, so what am I scared of? On the other hand, it's you who is afraid, isn't it? Butcher was furious and looked like an angry lion. When have I ever been afraid? When you barely existed back then, weren't you scared? Blind said with scorn. You were sprawled in the mud and had to crawl over with your arms. I may be blind, but it doesn't mean that I can't see. I know the fear in your heart. Damned Blind, you weren't any better than me back then. Butcher pulled out his knives and Blind threw away Qin Mu's hand to grip his cane tighter. Both of them overflowed with murderous aura. Qin Mu hurriedly squeezed himself between them to prevent them from really fighting. Lying on a recliner, village chief said with his head hurting, All right, stop squabbling. You two are usually on the best of terms, so do you think it's worth falling out over this matter? Old Butcher, Blind's foresight is usually the best, and he wants Mua to return for the child's good. Newt, you usually talk the least, but what you say holds weight. What's your opinion? Hermit Qingyu waved his hand and signaled for Wang Muren and the rest to come over. They immediately went to his side and asked in a low voice, Senior Uncle, what happened? Emperor Yangfeng killed Jade Sovereign of High Heavens, Wanda Qingyu said in a low voice. We know about this. However, why did these grandpas started squabbling? Mu Qingdai asked in bewilderment. Hermit Qingyu sighed and said, If Jade Sovereign of High Heavens had died under the hands of our little Jade capital, or old human emperor, it would be nothing, at most we would have a grudge with High Heavens. However, since he died under Emperor Yanfeng's hand, Eternal Peace Empire will be in grave trouble. Blind wants human emperor to return to Great Ruins, so he wouldn't be standing near a collapsing wall. Heaven Knife, on the other hand, wants to stay in eternal peace and scolds him as a coward. They have been fighting for quite a while regarding this matter. In the hall, Mute sat on the wooden chest. He took out a bag of shredded tobacco and lighted it up. He let out a puff of white smoke and squinted his eyes. What Mute said is logical. Village chief nodded. The younger generations will do all right on their own. We are all old farts, so there's no need to worry. For how much longer will we live? Can we protect Mua for his whole life? Blind hardened his resolve and said, I want him to go back to the village no matter what. I'll find him a woman to make a baby so he can live his life honestly. Why should we make him do what you couldn't do? Your limbs were severed, and this oaf even got his lower body chopped off. If Mua does what all of you did, everything under his neck will be chopped off. Mua, let's go home. Butcher couldn't resist saying, damned blind, you are making decisions on your own. Have you asked Qin Mu about his opinion? I have no need to ask. He was raised by me, so I can make decisions on my own. After Blind said that, he pulled onto Qin Mu's hand and walked out of the huge hall. The flood dragons immediately followed after them. Village chief frowned and said, Old Butcher, no need to chase after them. Blind will think things through. Butcher shook his head and said, that old fellow's temper is even more explosive than mine. He was actually furious. In the hall, Hermit Qin Mu sighed ruefully. He said to Wang Muren and the rest, Human Emperor invited us down the mountain to calculate the space algebra model of patching the divine bridge, and now that it's done, we have no need to remain in eternal peace empire, this place of troubles. Will you guys follow me back to Little Jade Capital? Long Yu and Mu Qingdai were somewhat hesitant. Long Yu wanted to return to Little Jade Capital, but he wasn't certain about it. His gaze subconsciously went to Wang Muren. Among the 3 disciples of Little Jade Capital, Wang Muren had the most ideas. Mu Qingdai had a playful heart, and the wonderful and brilliant encounters during the past few months made her want to stay. Wang Muren was silent for a moment, then said, Disciple had met Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor just now. Hermit Qin Mu raised his eyebrows, and Wang Muren continued, He no longer recognizes me. Hermit Qin Mu sighed and said, He is Imperial Preceptor, so he naturally won't remember you. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is working on the reform to change the world, creating a completely new structure. His path, skills, and divine arts see new development every day, and the speed of their improvement is godly. If I remain in Little Jade Capital to cultivate diligently, no matter if I work 100 times harder than him, I will never be able to surpass him in this life. Besides, he is also extremely hard-working. You want to stay here? Hermit Qin Mu asked. Wang Muren bowed. Disciple would like to enter the change of an era brought by the reform, which has already shown numerous things. The 3 sword forms of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, 6 directions Primordial Spirit of Human Emperor Qin, and also Sunshot Divine Canon, as well as Meteorological Divine Arts. This shows that the paths, skills, and divine arts are already changing. If I stay in Little Jade Capital and miss out on this era, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor will never remember me. When I seek revenge on him, he will also not remember who I am even after killing me in one attack. Hermit Qin Mu sighed in his heart. In that case, you shall remain here. Qingdai, Long Yu, what about the 2 of you? Mu Qingdai smiled and said, I'm also staying in case little junior brother doesn't have someone to look after him. Long Yu hesitated for a moment, then said, since junior brother and junior sister have both decided to stay, as the senior brother, I should stay behind and look after them. Hermit Qin Mu's head started to ache. All right then. Senior brother Yu He, let us return to Little Jade Capital. The 3 old immortals of Little Jade Capital rose and gestured to village chief, Mute, and Butcher before bidding farewell and leaving. When the 3 of them rose into the sky, Hermit Qin Mu said to Yu He and Yu Yun, I'm worried about these 3 disciples, so you guys shall return to Little Jade Capital first. I will look over them in the dark. The Emperor killed a god of high heavens, drawing unpredictable consequences. If you stay, you might also be dragged into it. This place of troubles is not a good place to stay. Yu He immediately said. Hermit Qin Mu smiled and said, Don't worry, I understand. My mortal heart is long gone, and I won't be tied down by the teeming world. When he said that, he went into hiding. Qin Mu sat down on the back of the dragon Qilin, and went on a journey with Blind at a steady pace. He let Blind come up, but he didn't want to. He just continued walking toward Great Ruins with his walking cane. After some time, Blind suddenly stopped walking. Qin Mu made the dragon Qilin stop, and the numerous dragons beside him also stopped. After a moment, Blind sighed with frustration and disappointment. Mua, old butcher wanted me to ask for your opinion, but I didn't do so. Now I ask you, are you willing to return to Great Ruins? Qin Mu smiled and said, since Grandpa Blind wants me to go back, I shall go back. If I said I wanted to stay, would Grandpa Blind allow me to stay? Of course not. Qin Mu changed the topic and asked, did village chief ask Grandpa Butcher about how the sun, moon, and stars are all fake? Ask the pig slaughterer yourself. Qin Mu didn't talk anymore. The two of them continued on their way until the sky gradually turned dark. Qin Mu started a fire to make dinner, and after the two of them had finished their dinner, Blind raised his bamboo cane and drew a circle around Qin Mu. He said, wait inside here and don't walk out of it. You can't walk out anyway. I shall go steal a wife for you and you shall get married and make babies when we get back to the village. Qin Mu jumped in shock. Blind took his bamboo cane and leaped into the sky, vanishing without a trace. Steal a wife. Make babies. Qin Mu's mind was blown. He immediately tried walking out of the circle, but he suddenly heard a hum as the circle Blind drew burst forth with light, bouncing him backward. Grandpa Blind's restriction is very powerful, but Grandpa Cripple taught me heavenly pilfering divine legs, which aren't afraid of any restrictions. Qin Mu exerted strength beneath his feet, but just as he executed heaven pilfering divine legs, he was bounced back again. The circle Blind had drawn was very marvelous. The size of the circle was precisely to counter heaven pilfering divine legs. Cripple's technique required extreme speed to break through the restraint of space. Only then would one be able to ignore all restrictions. Grandpa Blind taught me 9 Heaven's Eyes awakening skill, and isn't it just so that it can be used to break restrictions? Eyes awaken. Layers of formation swirled in Qin Mu's eyes when he opened Cyan Heaven's eyes. Focusing his gaze at the circle, he couldn't help feeling decrepit. He couldn't understand what he was seeing. This video will end here.